A Complete Unknown explores the time period from 1961 to 1965 when Bob Dylan moved from Minnesota to New York City, exploding into the folk scene and then eventually going electric. James Mangold's biopic is led by the terrific Timothée Chalamet. Let's break down A Complete Unknown.
What's up, movie friends, and welcome back to Raiders of the Lost podcast, the ultimate film and TV podcast. And today we're going to be breaking down the excellent Bob Dylan epic, A Complete Unknown, from director James Mangold. And I had an absolute blast with this film. We saw it in December, and it was one of my favorite releases of 2024, although it didn't really go wide until 2025, which is why we're now covering it. We gave people enough time to see the film, which was a big hit. Both critics and audiences love it, made a ton of money at the box office, and features incredible filmmaking, great cinematography, unbelievable performances, live singing and guitar playing. I had an absolute blast, and it was a really cool dive into not just Bob Dylan's history, but it was a history of folk music and how the evolution it undertook during the 1960s and 70s.
Also, how influential Bob Dylan was back then in his meteoric rise as this young guy from Minnesota, from the middle of nowhere, who comes to New York City with nothing but a guitar and a couple bucks in his pocket, with silly, crazy stories of carnies and making up these tales, changing his name multiple times, but with this otherworldly talent that obviously led to one of the most successful musicians of all time and best songwriters to ever live, the only songwriter to ever win the Nobel Peace Prize, and then eventually showing the transformation from his folk singing to electric, and going from acoustic to electric. That's basically the main plot of the film, and basically how he deals with the fame, the attention, being such a young guy, being so talented, being adored around the world, but also just, I think this movie was a great example of how biopics should be done. Of course, there's the fanciful route you can do with Better Man or Rocket Man, Bohemian Rhapsody, but when you go clear-cut, straightforward, grounded biopics, I think James Mangold's probably the best there is. Walk the Line was terrific, and then I knew this was going to be great. I've been so late to the game for A Complete Unknown, and man, I left the theater knowing that Timmy is that guy. He's the guy. This movie's fantastic, and it sounded so good. What kind of theater did you see this in?
I saw this in IMAX.
Okay.
Yeah, and it was great. It sounded fantastic. I went 2 weeks after the release, and so it was actually 3 people in the entire stadium seating arrangement, and it was just like I felt like I had a theater to myself, and it was really incredible, and it sounded great. You and I have been we've actually we used to film live music back in the day, so we know a fair bit about how difficult that is and how important it is. If you're gonna do it live or make you seem like you're doing it live, do it for real. Don't try to pretend, and don't do it in post afterwards. And so you and I have a pretty good fine-tuned ear to whether it's really on screen or not. And I was really surprised, not just Chalamet, but also Barbara, Boyd Holbrook, and they did a fantastic job. And it's funny, you think of James Mangold, he's the only director to put Johnny Cash on screen twice, if you think about it.
Yeah.
In 2 different iterations. And by the way, I loved Boyd Holbrook in this. But
unrecognizable as Johnny Cash.
Awesome.
Unrecognizable.
He's going to be the most underappreciated actor working right today. And in my theater, it sounded excellent. And I also noticed just like there's plenty of movies where there's live singing, but they're not really playing guitar. They were really playing the guitar and singing in this film, and you could really tell.
And you can even see slight little intricacies in every chord that Timmy played or anyone else playing. So if anyone plays guitar or instruments, you can tell this is definitely live recorded. I saw this in an incredible theater. I saw it at the Television Academy's theater in the Valley, the Wolf Theater, which is just fantastic. It was such a great seating arrangement. It's this massive, massive theater, maybe like 500 seats, but the acoustics, the sound are incredible. It's very much like a soundproof environment. Like you walk into the theater and it's just like a different atmosphere, because the sound in this movie obviously is so important with the singing, but even just the sound design when it comes to walking around New York City in the streets at night. That was one of my favorite parts of the movie, was the sound design. You know, anytime Bob's walking around, you hear all the music in the streets, you hear cars, everything. It sounded so realistic. It really engrossed you in the world that James Mangold created, bringing you back in the 1960s New York. It felt authentic. It felt real. It felt like a real environment, transported completely. And overall, this movie was really excellent. And I knew it'd be good, but it beat my expectations. You know, Mangold coming off the last indie film that was, you know, not stellar. But obviously Ford vs. Ferrari, his most recent film before that, was fucking kick-ass. I love that movie so much. So I was very confident that Mangold would put forth a great Bob Dylan biopic because he's been working on this for such a long time, for years and years. And Timothée Chalamet has been attached to this project since 2019. 2020, they were supposed to film it. Wow. COVID lockdowns and restrictions put the film on the back burner realistically for a while. And then the filmmakers were forced to go forward with other projects. That's when Mangold got attached to the new Indiana Jones film, Dial of Destiny. But Timothée Chalamet, originally he was supposed to have only 4 months of training for singing and guitar. He'd already been training guitar for Call Me By Your Name a few years prior, but he only had 4 months of prep in the original plan before lockdowns, before COVID. But because of that, it gave him the opportunity to practice for 5 years of all the Dylan songs, really understand the character, but get his guitar playing really, really proficient. His singing is really excellent. And you can argue that because of the 5 years of training, it made this movie so transcendent.
You can really see how that work, like you said, paid off, and because he became very good at guitar and obviously very good at playing these songs. Because if you see the scenes, especially the more intimate ones, when he's playing in the hospital, and a couple of the others where it's just him, Seeger, and the other guy, the other musician, Woody Guthrie.
Played by another really underrated
Scoot McNairy.
Scoot McNairy.
Oh my God, he broke my heart in this movie. I couldn't believe, I felt so bad for him. And in these performances, especially that first one he plays for Woody, and it's the song he wrote for Woody, Chalamet, you could tell because he became so proficient with the guitar playing that he's able to do it without thinking about it. And so he's able to really act with his face and his gestures. So the singing is real, the guitar playing is real, but because he got so good at the guitar playing for these songs, he wasn't focused on the guitar playing like you'll see in other performances. He was able to just like do those like auto playing essentially and act with his face. And for me, when I saw that, I was like, oh, he got good at playing because he doesn't even have to think about playing these songs.
It's just really, really impressive performances. We all knew Muad'Dib, we knew he'd come through and give us a great performance, one of the best performances of Bob Dylan, because there's been several biopics, but this one's really good.
When did you start listening to Bob Dylan? I think we all go through different periods of when we discover him, really.
I mean, it's tough to say like when you start listening to him because you know the songs. You grew up hearing the songs in movies, on the radio, all of the time. And then as you get older, you start to piece together, oh, that was a Bob Dylan song. I didn't realize that was a Bob Dylan cover.
Sure.
And then, you know, in my teenage years, I was getting really into classic rock and playing guitar myself. Never really got into playing Dylan, but I started listening to more Bob Dylan then. But also, I've always been very, you know, anti-conformity when I was younger. So I wouldn't
anything that's popular.
Yeah, I wouldn't listen to like, oh, everyone listens to the Beatles, everyone listens to Dylan. I'm not going to listen to them. But eventually, I found my way to Dylan at some point, and off and on, you know. So I would say, you know, my teenage years, you start to realize how much music you know that's Bob Dylan.
Yeah,
that you've heard in movies, you've heard on TV, you've heard on the radio, and then you start to understand, wow, this guy wrote 55 albums. That's insane.
And for me, I would say it's when Mumford & Sons came out. Because you could kind of make a parallel. Because,
for you?
Yeah, because Mumford & Sons made folk music cool again and mainstream again. Like, it's a folk band, not plugged in, and they were selling out arenas.
Yeah,
like, that was just, like, they were globally gigantic, especially their first two albums.
You could argue R.E.M. was doing that earlier, though.
Oh, were they folk?
I mean, R.E.M. was definitely had an influence on Mumford & Sons.
Okay, for sure.
For sure.
All right. And, I would say because I got really into Mumford when they came out, then I started exploring folk music. And that's how I got into Dylan when I was in my late teens, early 20s. But it's really because Mumford was that entry point into folk music for me.
I mean, you could also argue that Dave Matthews Band was very, very folky to an extent, like pop folk. And then, but folk has, like acoustic popular folk has boomed again.
Yes, it's huge.
You know, with Mumford, the Lumineers,
Yeah.
so many other great, you know, folk bands just becoming
Jay-Z.
very popular. Jay-Z. You always bring up Jay-Z at the worst times.
Isn't it bad again?
I mean, it's always been bad. Like the last 3 months, you just don't bring it up. But folk music's always been great, and I like how, you know, Mumford made it so popular again in a lot of ways. but Bob influencing so many musicians, but also being influenced by musicians. I like how this movie goes to the roots, the musicians that influenced him so much, because a lot of biopics, they have been doing a great job lately showing the influence and the inspiration of these great bands, of these musicians, the different types of music they were listening to, the respect they have for past musicians, showing that here, but also then someone with Bob Dylan in this biopic, someone who revolutionized music, changed music, but also it's not so much changed music, he just did his own thing where he didn't want to be labeled as just a folk singer. He's like, people are telling me what folk is, but what is folk? I'm going to decide what I'm going to play. And that whole plot revolving around Bob Dylan being the leader and the biggest star in the folk world and folk scene, but then going electric, how much of a shockwave that sent through the industry was so fascinating.
My favorite storyline was the history of it and his part in it, and in a way, his reluctancy to be, this symbol for folk in America. And I loved, because what was great about this film, it wasn't just about the artist, it was about, like you said, his bubble and everyone in the orbit. And Pete Seeger, played by Edward Norton, I really loved his role in it. It was just a fascinating look into how this, at the time, culturally significant musician Pete Seeger, and I was like, this is the guy who made "This Land Is Your Land,"
Puff the Magic
this
Dragon.
Land is my land, and he kind of discovered Bob Dylan. What? That's crazy!
So cool.
It's unbelievable. And so I really love this story and the connection the two of them had, but then how they were pulled apart by two very different perspectives. And Bob was the new, and Pete was the old. And it was also interesting to see how, being at the forefront of the folk scene in America, Pete Seeger, he used Bob as an icon to make folk mainstream. And there's this great point near the end of the film at the Newport Festival where Bob's got a huge crowd singing to his new song, and they're hearing it for the first time, but they're by the second chorus iteration, they're singing the chorus with him, and then you see Pete. He's just like, "This is it. We did it. Bob did it. He made folk music mainstream." But that brought a lot of conflict because they then wanted to make Bob folk only, and you can only play folk, especially if you come to these festivals. And so Bob battling with that, his identity, who he is as an artist, not wanting to be told what he's supposed to play, not being told how he's supposed to play, but really being free. And that's what made him a sensation, and that's what blew him up, because he did his own thing, and he had his own unique, very distinct voice that nobody had ever heard before. So I loved all of the background with Pete Seeger and Bob Dylan, and for me, it was really one of my favorite storylines in the entire film. And Edward Norton and Chalamet, I think, played off each other perfectly.
Did you know Benedict Cumberbatch was supposed to play Pete Seeger?
Oh, that would have been good,
too. He was originally cast as Pete Seeger back in 2019, 2020 when they were supposed to make the movie, but because of shutting down production, scheduling conflicts, he couldn't do it anymore.
Busy guy.
But that would have been interesting to see Benedict Cumberbatch as Pete Seeger in this film.
It was nice seeing Edward Norton play a really nice guy.
He's played nice guys before.
Like who?
He plays a bunch of weirdos, but yeah, I mean, he's had some nice guys in there. I'm sure.
I don't know about that.
He's played some interesting characters for sure. He's got a great career. But directed by James Mangold, A Complete Unknown was written by James Mangold and Jay Cox, based on Dylan Goes Electric by Elijah Wald, the novel. IMDb, it's a 7.7 right now. Rotten Tomatoes, it's 80% critic score, 96% audience score. Letterboxd, A Complete Unknown is a 3.6 on a budget of about $50 to $70 million. This grossed the box office right now at about $90 million. Pretty solid. A Complete Unknown explores the period from 1961 to 1965 when Bob Dylan moves to New York City from Minnesota and meets Woody Guthrie and Pete Seeger and becomes part of the folk scene in Greenwich Village and encounters Joan Baez and has a relationship with Sylvie, an artist activist whose beliefs motivate him to perform at the 1963 March on Washington and to pen A Hard Rain's A Gonna Fall during the Cuban Missile Crisis. This period culminates with Dylan and his band performing with electric, not acoustic, instruments at the Newport Folk Festival in 1965, a controversial event many heralded as the bridge between traditional folk and rock music. Along the way, we see how he deals with his sudden fame, development as unwanted, and it was unexpected. This movie right now has 8 Academy Award nominations, including Best Sound, Best Picture, Best Directing, Best Performance in a Leading Role, Best Performance by an Actress in a Supporting Role for Monica Barbaro, Best performance by an actor in a supporting role, obviously for Ed Norton, and then adapted screenplay, Jay Cooks, James Mangold, and achievement in costume design. We'll see how it does next month at the Academy Awards, but I can guarantee, or I don't guarantee, but I feel like now, because of the controversy of the last couple weeks and months with AI and then controversial opinions and tweets, that Timothy seems to be the front runner for Best Lead Actor.
I predict that he will win now. I predict he's going to win the Oscar now that the Amelia Perez,
yeah. I think every category for Amelia Perez is up in the air now.
Yes.
That's why I think that they're going to lose out on a lot of roles and performances.
Mm-hmm. I think that right now he looks like the front runner, honestly, and he would deserve it. He's great in this film, and it's funny you're talking about the overall plot of the film and Bob switching to electric and the backlash he faced, and it's a little overblown in the film just for better stakes and conflict. We can get into that later. But again, you go back to, history repeating itself. Mumford & Sons, with their third studio album, Wilder Mind, went electric, and it divided fans and polarized fans for them going electric, even though they were originally electric musicians but became a folk band while they were touring with a folk artist because they wrote songs together as the bandmates with their folk instruments. That was their first two albums. Then they went electric, faced a lot of heat and backlash and confusion, and then Bob went through this in the 70s. It's pretty interesting how history does repeat itself.
Yeah, and they're not the only band that's had that. A lot of artists change their style. It can be musicians, it can be filmmakers, it can be artists of any kind that change their style. Writers too. It happens with a lot of books and novelists who have diehard fan bases. I mean, that's the entire plot of freaking what's it called? With James Caan and
James Caan,
what's her name?
He plays an author?
Yeah. Fucking, he gets abandoned in the.
And
he, what's it called? I can't be on the Stephen King movie. Misery. That's the whole plot. Misery. He's changing up the story. He's gonna kill the main character off. And you're gonna piss off your fan base. That's an extreme example of pissing off your fan base.
Great connection.
And what can happen? But I mean, at the end of the day, it's not just musicians. It's not just Bob Dylan or Mumford & Sons. This happens to all kinds of artists that change something up in their norm because you build your fan base that people love you for the specific thing. And some artists, they stay the same, which is totally fine. They make the same kind of movies. They make the same kind of music over and over and over again, decade after decade, and everyone loves them for it. But there's something admirable about someone, especially at the time in the 1960s when, a lot of things are being discovered, different kinds of music, different kinds of movies, different kinds of storytelling. Now everything's been done 1,000 times, but this is a really exciting period for artists in America and Western civilization to really invent new things and make new sounds. And Bob Dylan being so talented, otherworldly talents mixed with his human vices and human weaknesses. It's such a great character to explore, creating kind of a new sound, what that would do. And again, it sent shockwaves through his fan base, through the folk fan base, and the entire world.
And what I saw multiple times in this film that Mangold used to really strong effect multiple times, that was kind of like the Spielberg stare. When people would hear Bob sing and play for the first time, you saw it 5 times in the film. First it was Woody and Pete, and then it was Joan at the club, and then Sylvie as well. We get multiple times characters watching him and hearing him for the first time, and we got the Spielberg stare in a way. And I think it worked really well because it showed, even with the seasoned musicians, people who have been professional musicians for years, even when they heard Bob, they were transfixed by him, and they had never heard anything like it before.
I have some great Letterboxd reviews I'd love to read
They're
out.
Always
They're
fun.
very funny. So this one's from Reese, 4 stars. Woman, you're such an asshole. How do you make such good music? Bob Dylan, unintelligible mumbling. Woman, fuck, you're so hot. This one's from Tim Tampetis. May thy guitar chip and shatter.
That's a 10 out of 10.
Zoe Rose Bryant. Trigger warning for any girl who's ever had her heart broken by a self-involved artist with tousled hair and poor communication skills.
That's every musician.
Been sent to me before.
Yeah. That's been sent to you before?
Yeah.
Your hair is tousled.
Mac, 5 stars. What was the cigarette budget?
I appreciate all the smoking in this movie.
Here we go from Ben of the Week, 5 stars. I understood all of the 5 words out of his mouth.
Your songs are like an oil painting at the dentist's office.
And those are some of the funniest ones, but I think people really enjoyed this film. But I appreciate the cigarettes as well.
Yes.
You know, I think Anthony and I have brought up multiple times how a lot of period pieces that we've been seeing recently from specific studios and a lot of studios in general have been cutting back on cigarettes in movies, which, of course, smoking cigarettes is not good for you. You don't want to promote it, and people aren't promoting it like they used to, obviously. It's a dangerous
Smoking's
thing.
way down.
But for 100 years, everyone was ripping butts. Everyone was ripping ciggies, and Bob Dylan's been ripping cigarettes his entire life. So I thought it was great to show constant smoking of Timothée Chalamet in this movie as Bob Dylan, because Dylan is a cigarette head. You know, he's been smoking cigs for so long. It would have been inauthentic to not have him smoking cigarettes the whole film.
If you don't have people smoking in the 60s in every scene, it's not the 60s. You know, everyone smoked.
Everyone had a
It was
cigarette in their
everywhere,
hand.
indoors, no matter where you were, in someone's apartment, in a restaurant, on an
Fucking
airplane,
planes. Yeah.
everywhere. Like, people smoke. So when you watch period pieces and you don't see people smoking, depending on what the period piece is, obviously where it's set. But if they didn't have anyone smoking in this movie, it wouldn't have felt right. But speaking of the setting and the environment, production design was fantastic. This is an excellent New York City movie. It was beautifully made, so well photographed and lit. This was actually shot with the Sony Venice 2 digital cinema camera by Fiat and Papa Michael, who was the DP. And the Sony Venice 2, this is mind-blowing to me. He was able to shoot with the 12,800 ISO on this camera without creating digital noise. And if you know anything about cameras, that's fucking insane.
It's basically increasing the sensitivity of your camera so more light can be seen in the image, but it often leads to a downside in cameras, especially past digital cameras, where it creates a lot of digital noise and reduces sharpness, so it creates a poor image a lot of the times. But to be able to do that with no noise was absurd.
He was talking about in an interview where their goal was they wanted, and they chose this camera because of how they wanted to light the night scenes in New York City, Greenwich Village, Manhattan, what have you, all over Brooklyn too. And he and Mangold had this goal of, we want it to feel real. They said they didn't want to put gigantic, huge crane lights to create moonlight and fill and backlight, and they didn't want it to feel like it was artificial, and they didn't want it to feel like it was forcibly lit. So they chose this camera because of its unbelievable high quality and low light and powerful sensitivity. Like, this is absurd how powerful the sensitivity is getting nowadays. Still maintaining the quality. And so if you watch these scenes, and I was really struck by the evening exterior scenes in this film. I've never seen New York look like this on screen before, because they were able to use all practicals all over the exterior sets. So they were able to set up lamps, lanterns, street lights, what have you, awnings, like storefront lights, to light all of their nighttime scenes. And they were able to expose for those and their subjects, whatever actors they were. And still, they were able to get the blue of the night sky overhead. And there's actually been some pretty recent films that have done digital night skies that look good. But it's digital. But this is just real. Like, in real life, our eyes are better than cameras, so we're able to see in the evening. I can look outside at my house, and I can see the lights on in the house, and then I can see the light of the sky. Cameras forever have not been able to expose for both. However, this camera got really close, and I thought it was incredible to be able to see the blue of evening overhead, and then to see Greenwich Village lit by practicals. I thought it looked outstanding.
It's probably the closest, you're right, to the naked eye low light. It's very good. It was very good, but also not just exteriors, but think about all the clubs we're in. We had these very dimly low lit clubs, which are what clubs really like. You know, some candlelight and maybe a light in the corner. You know, that's a part of these small little open mics. Any little musician club or any piano bar, it's always very dimly lit. Even just alcohol bars, they're very dimly lit. And I thought that was one of my favorite parts as well of the low light, was how great it looked with just very minimal lighting, because it creates that great mood and ambience. Like, everything seems to pick up on that same warmth level, and it looked freaking awesome, man.
And they had custom anamorphic lenses built for this camera, because I'm not sure anyone has made anamorphics that fit onto these cameras, because it's a relatively new camera. So they had custom lenses, and they mostly shot with the 40 millimeter, he said, for most of the film.
So after the movie got shut down during lockdown and COVID, It was on the back burner for a while. Mangold made Dial of Destiny. Everyone did other projects. Obviously, Timothy doing Dune Part 2 and a couple other films.
He leveled up.
Yeah, I mean, Monica Barbaro doing Top Gun Maverick. Everyone was busy. And then in April 2023, Mangold stated that principal photography would likely begin in August 2023 in New York City and Montreal, but filming was postponed again to July due to the SAG-AFTRA strike in 2023, so it got shut down again. But then eventually they got to do their production in March 2024, so they filmed just last year, all over New Jersey and New York City, and mostly shooting in Jersey, but, it all looks pretty similar. And filming began in March and wrapped in just June 2024, so not that long ago.
Whoa, that was a quick post-production.
3 months of principal photography. I mean, it's not a lot of post-visual effects going on here, you know what I mean? It's a lot of good editing. And, like we said, Chalamet was relentless in staying immersed in his role as Dylan for years, on sets, practicing constantly. And also he was referred to by Mangold as Bob. The cast list every day or a call sheet would usually have him listed as Bob Dylan at this time for call sheets.
That's why in Dune 2 he sounded like Bob Dylan. Yeah, I'm Paul Muad'Dib Atreides.
Duke of Arrakis. Your holy war is not for me, man. And he's so impressive. What I loved so much about this biopic was how much music there was. It seemed like it was 40-60 music to storytelling and narrative. It was a lot, and I was not overwhelmed by it because I think Mangold and the team did a great job with their editing and planning of just doing excerpts from a song. They would do a song that everyone knows, just do a couple verses from it, maybe the chorus. And the next song we hear, same kind of thing. So just doing short versions of so many songs, but there had to have been what? I think, here we go. Chalamet sings 40 Dylan songs in the film while playing guitar and harmonica. So 40 Bob Dylan songs plus Joan Baez songs, Pete Seeger songs, Johnny Cash songs. There had to have been 60 songs in this movie, which didn't feel like a lot. It didn't feel like you heard 60 songs because that would take, if they were full runtimes, it'd be like a 4-hour movie. You know what I mean? But I thought it was really great editing and pacing. And it wasn't overwhelming at all.
And unlike a lot of musicals, you only hear the songs because the characters are playing them. It's not just like one of the famous songs playing over a scene in the background because, this artist made the song. If you hear the song, if you hear the music, if you hear the song, one of the performers is actually doing it on screen. And for me, that immerses you. That makes it feel less phony. And I also really enjoyed how they showed a lot of the songwriting processes, both in the recording studio and then also Bob in his apartment, and also showing how he pieced together pieces of art, other pieces of writing and poetry and history, and also what was happening in the world politically and culturally, and how he would write his music influenced by what was happening in the world, especially the song he wrote for the Cuban Missile Crisis. And I thought it was so cool to see, look behind the curtain of what it's like for a musician to craft a song, whether they're trying to get the right chords or they're trying to put the lines together. They might have the sound of the melody, but not the actual lyrics. So I think they did an excellent job showing the creativity and the process of songwriting really well.
And it's always important to show what's happening in the world during a biopic because the influence that those things have. When I saw the Led Zeppelin documentary recently, they had a whole bit on the moon landing and then post-World War II in England and the destruction. And it's really fascinating because you get to see what was going on at the time when these artists or athletes or whoever the movie's about, what was going on in the world at the time that influenced their behaviors, that influenced their decisions in their lives and their art if they were artists. However, I think some movies with biopics spend too much time on that. They might spend too much time on the political movements, on the cultural movements that are happening, and that kind of takes away from the musician, takes away from the biopic itself, and it's more about that versus the artist, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
But I think that this movie did a great job bringing all the things up that mattered in the world at the time, but I think they approached it more sort of in the pacing of Forrest Gump, where it's like, this political movement's happening. Let's have a minute or two here talking about that. He attends an event for this for like 30 seconds. Just like
the most influential man who ever lived.
Yeah, so it's just really short segments about what's happening in culture versus the entire movie about being the cultural movements and political movements.
And it was great to see. So Sylvie, played by Elle Fanning, who is becoming a really strong actor. I think she's fantastic.
Yeah, she's great.
She's wonderful. And I've never seen her do a role like this. I think she's really coming into her own in the craft, and she's going to be around for a while, man. She's going to be a major star for a long time. And this was a terrific performance. I also like the fact that she chose to do this role where I think we went through a period in Hollywood of like 10 years of, not writing female characters to like just be the girlfriend. You know what I mean? But Bob Dylan had a girlfriend at this time. They changed her name for the film. We won't say it on the podcast to respect that. So they came up with the name Sylvie Russo because she did heavily influence Bob Dylan in his writing. From what I researched, she was an activist. She was an artist. She was also into writing and poetry. And she would encourage him to be more political. And she encouraged him to go to the march. She encouraged him to write more politically. And she said in interviews that both of their arts, both of each other's opposites influenced the other. So she was influenced by him in her work, and then he was influenced by her with her work, in his work. And so I think they did a great job of showing how two people, even though they didn't end up together, when they were together, they both clashed, but also embraced one another. And when you have a partner, they influence you they change how you think, and they can show you not change how you think, but show you new ways of thinking, introduce you to new concepts, perspectives, introduce you to new music and art. And I like how in the apartment there's so many books because she was a voracious reader and taking into the poetry. So Bob Dylan himself said that what she brought him in terms of what she read and what she enjoyed as an artist, it heavily influenced his songwriting and lyrics. And so I think it was absolutely essential to have this character. And I think it worked really well. They flowed really well together.
It's a sad story, too, because, because of who Bob Dylan is, it's never going to work out. And Bob Dylan's someone who we find out, again, just absurd talent from, godlike talent with songwriting and singing. And his talent is just profound. But then he has so many human faults and so many human weaknesses. He's this guy who's just this young 19, 20-year-old guy, come from nowhere, Minnesota. He's a slave to his music and songwriting. He's full of so much ambition. He has these fake stories of traveling as a carny, learning all these guitar tricks from carnies. However, he's so distant, he's aloof, he's insanely driven, but also uncaring. Sometimes he fakes being like he cares, but he doesn't. Enigmatic. He's very self-absorbed at times. He's an asshole. He is oftentimes said in the movie that he's an asshole. And he takes on all those traits and embraces them so well. It's Chalamet. But also he's got this charisma that just exudes on screen that keeps you fixed, keeps you rooting for him despite being unlikable in a lot of ways. But it's because he's so charismatic. He's so talented. This was a once-in-a-100-year talent kind of person when it comes to songwriting and music. Just an absolute genius, creative genius, but also a voice for the world because all of his lyrics and many of his songs, whether they're about love or romance or about things that are happening culturally in their world, whether it's about war, political things, they're all things that we're all feeling inside at the time, or people who lived back then at the time, they're feeling these things, but Bob's singing them for us all so that we can all hear them and we can all sort of express ourselves through his music in a lot of ways.
The scenes with Woody were essential for this film to work because it showed Bob's heart and the love he had for Woody, who influenced him as a musician more than anyone else, and his desire to always try to connect with Woody, to play music, to try and entertain him, to make him feel good. I think that those scenes were really vital to the character of Bob Dylan working because, like you said, he can be an asshole and kind of not use people, but treat them like not as important. And like you said, he's a consumed artist and he tunnel vision in a way.
I mean, he loves Sylvie.
Yeah.
He clearly loves Sylvie, but Bob's the kind of guy clearly at this stage in his life, it's hard to love him. Mm-hmm. And him and Joan Baez have their off and on relationship as well. And even after their stuff breaks up and they kind of hate, or she kind of hates him, still whenever they're singing on stage together, there's something there. There's a magic quality to Joan Baez's eyes when she's singing with Bob Dylan that I fucking hate this guy, but Jesus Christ, it's Bob Dylan. This guy's he's so talented.
It's important not to always deify your subject, which is why this film is really strong because it didn't deify him. It did obviously show how amazing he was and talented, but also showed his faults, which is if you just painted it in a good light, the audience would reject it. But if you show the flaws and you show the ups and the downs, then we see it as a truthful and honest portrait of a human being, because at the end of the day, that's all he is. And I think that also, you see that not just with Sylvie and Joan, but also with Pete when he realizes he's losing Bob. When you realize it's like he's like the dad in a way, especially when he asks to hang out with Bob and Bob's with his friends, he's like, "Oh, we're leaving," and you see like Pete has become like this old dad from the past who's like trying to get his son to bond with him in a way. You know what I mean? There was this father-son dynamic, and in a way, his son grew up and left the nest, and the nest being raw folk music. And so I think that they did an excellent job showcasing the effect he had on everyone in his life. Fun fact about Ed Norton's performance is he actually played Pete Seeger's real guitar that he really played.
The 12-string one,
yeah,
right? Yeah,
it's the real one that he played in real life.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Well, going back to deification, another great relationship shows that as well, and shows the supreme talent of Bob Dylan, where Bob's a huge Johnny Cash fan. Johnny Cash is one of the biggest singers on the planet, and especially in North America. And they're pen pals. They haven't met yet, but they finally meet at the Newport Film Festival, and it's really cool. But then, he gets the letter from Bob. I mean, before that, he even gets the letter from Johnny saying that your album is my most prized possession. It's a really sweet thing. But then the final Newport Film Festival, the third act of the film, Johnny Cash is there as well. And Johnny is like at a lower level now than Bob. And he looks up to Bob now, which is so fascinating to see that dynamic shift where Bob always looked up to Johnny, but now Johnny's looking up to Bob, even though he gives him the advice the day before to just make it loud, rub some mud on the carpet, basically. But when Bob goes out there and does a whole new thing, Johnny's just in awe. Johnny's like, "Bob, oh my God, you just rocked my socks. That was incredible. Like, I'm blown away," basically. And he kind of just walks past Johnny. So it was interesting to see that relationship change, even though this movie's big time fact versus fiction.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things that are right. There are a lot of things that liberties have been taken because it's a movie. It's a Hollywood movie. It's sensationalized. Some things are changed for better plot, for better storytelling. And, I think when we get back from an intermission, I'd love to talk about some of the fact versus fiction things.
That's a great place to stop.
Yeah, but how about, so we'll take our break right now.
Nice segue.
And before we continue, the best way to support Raiders of the Lost Podcast is to become a patron today at patreon.com/Raiders of the Lost Podcast. This is so integral to our show's success and growth and survival. It's a membership program, if you haven't heard of it. There are 5 different tiers, each one priced differently, but each one has different perks. The higher up you get, obviously the more perks you get, but everyone has access to weekly bonus episodes of the show. You have access to the ad-free version of every single episode, so you can listen without the commercial breaks. You get access to our Discord at specific tiers, free merchandise, all kinds of stuff. We love our patrons so much, past, present, and future. You're the reason why Raiders of the Lost Podcast is alive and thriving. So thank you so much, all of you patrons from around the world. Another great way to support the show, leave those 5-star ratings and reviews on Spotify and Apple. You know the deal. Every podcast asks you to do this, but that's because it is so important. It helps us get seen by new people, helps build reputability to the show so that people take a chance at listening to us. People can read the reviews that you all leave. I'm going to read a written review out from Apple Podcasts in just a minute because it's my favorite thing to do every single week. Subscribing on YouTube is also very, very helpful. We just broke 50,000 subscribers last week, which was a huge deal for us. So help us celebrate by helping us get to 100,000 subscribers on YouTube, which would be huge news. And the final great way to support the show, just share us with your family and friends. Word of mouth is the best way for a podcast to grow organically. Tell people you know that you know this movie podcast that covers cool films, new, past, present, future films, all kinds of stuff. Our movie news weekly episodes, if they just only have time for that, send them that so they know all the stuff that's happening in film and TV. Thank you all so much. Share us on Instagram, our TikTok videos, our Reels. That's very, very helpful as well.
This episode, of course, is sponsored by our friends at movieposters.com, the number one place to get your posters online today. Be sure to use our promo code Raiders10 at movieposters.com to get 10% off your order right now. They have a huge selection of pretty much every movie and TV show imaginable in their poster library, as well as all sorts of sizes, framing, and even backlighting for your poster needs. They have everything from your favorite Hollywood blockbuster to your favorite Hollywood classic, as well as international films, alternate prints, and collector's items like lobby cards and original movie poster prints of classic films. So, again, for all of your movie needs, go to movieposters.com to get yourself some amazing posters and use our promo code Raiders10 to get yourself 10% off your order right now.
Let's get into our intermission and start with our first game, Cinephile, a card game for movie fans and cinephiles where each card is a different actor or actress, and we have to go back and forth naming movies from their filmography until someone cannot anymore. And the card we chose today, or I just pulled, is Gary Oldman.
Okay.
It's a good one, and you cannot say the movie, the Leon the Professional, because that's the image of him in the card.
Copy that.
So go ahead, Anthony, take it away.
Batman Begins.
The Dark Knight.
Dark Knight Rises.
Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban.
Harry Potter, Deathly Hallows Part 2.
Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix.
Harry Potter and Goblet of Fire. Did you put your name into the Goblet of Fire?
Darkest Hour.
Tinker Tailor, Soldier, Spy.
Sid and Nancy.
True Romance.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah.
It's a whiteboard day. He thinks it's a whiteboard day.
This is Whiteboard Day.
Such a great role. If you don't remember them in that, it's so good. The Fifth Element.
Oh, good one. I'm blanking. Gary. Holy shit, I'm blanking, Gary Oldman. I'm sorry. Oh man. Come to me.
Come to me.
Dracula. Bram Stoker's Dracula. Yes.
Nosferatu just reminded Anthony of Bram Stoker's Dracula. God damn it.
That was close.
It's really funny.
Oh my god.
Alrighty then. Let me get into Gary mode. Gary. It would be cool to see him do a Nolan movie again.
It would.
Yeah, I could see him.
Maybe he'll be cast in Odyssey.
Red Dragon.
Oppenheimer.
I forgot he plays the president.
I was like, I hope he doesn't realize that. he was
Damn
just
it.
in one.
Damn it. Fucking hell, lad. Fucking hell. All right. This is a good one. We've got like 8 each.
Gary's tough. I'm having trouble.
He's in a lot of movies, but he's in a lot of TV nowadays too. I'm out. I can't. I'm running out of time. And that's timer's up.
Did you say Red Dragon?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Well, I lose.
That was tough.
Yeah.
I don't even want to look at his IMDb. It's going to piss me
It's
off.
gonna be embarrassing. That was a pretty good round.
I pulled Dracula out of my ass.
Yeah.
Thanks to that quote.
God damn it. All right. Movie quote competition, guys. Anthony, you ready?
Ready.
And that's what happens when you sit behind a desk. You forget things, like the weight in the hand of a gun that's loaded and one that's not.
Huh. That's a good quote.
That's what happens when you sit behind a desk. You forget things, like the weight in the hand of a gun that's loaded and one that's not.
Casino Royale?
No.
No, I don't know.
Kind of similar sort of scene.
Yeah.
Taken.
Oh, okay. I have not seen that movie since it came out.
His French buddy.
I was never going to get that. Here's my quote.
Excuses.
I got it. It's my own fault. I got it wrong. No excuses. I suck. Let me tell you a little something about your beloved Dark Father. He's the one that killed your family. He never could follow his own rules. Said he couldn't abide by the taste of livestock. So every once in a while, he'd go out and gorge himself on human blood. I kept the secrets and cleaned up the mess. But he's the one who crept room to room that night, dispatching everyone close to your heart. But when he got to you, he just couldn't bear the thought of draining you dry.
Oh, what is this? Interview with the Vampire?
No.
Fuck. I should know this. Oh, Underworld.
Yep.
Yeah.
Correct. Bill Nighy killed
Selena's
Selena's
family.
family, yeah.
Yeah. Good quote. Anthony, guess this movie release year. Ed Wood.
1998.
94.
It's an old movie. Fuck. What year did Frost Nixon come out?
2004.
2008.
Movie pop quiz time, Anthony. In 2007, the Bob Dylan biopic, I'm Not There, several actors played Bob Dylan. Can you name them all?
Cate Blanchett, Christian Bale, Heath Ledger, Richard Gere, that little kid. I don't know the kid's name. Jack.
I'll give the kid's a tough one. Kid's a tough one.
So that's 4.
Yeah, well, 5.
Five.
There's another actor.
Hold on, let me try and picture it. Blanchett, Bale, Ledger, Gere. Who else? I don't know.
Ben Whishaw.
Oh yeah, he had the big hair.
Yeah.
Good one. Good question. That might have been the first thing I ever saw Ben Whishaw in.
Possibly.
Yeah.
Well, and then Skyfall was 2008?
11?
2011. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
That was a while ago.
Cool. All right. What is Michael Sheen's character name in Tron Legacy?
Michael Sheen's character name in Tron Legacy. Can I look up Michael Sheen's face for familiarity?
Yeah, he's in Underworld.
He's Michael Sheen. Oh, Michael Shannon?
Michael Sheen,
Michael Sheen?
the British actor. He's Frost.
Oh, his last name's Sheen. I thought it was something else. Yeah, I know Michael
His
Sheen.
character has a name and then a
Yeah.
secret code name. You can say either one.
Fuck. What is his name in that? I've seen the movie 15 times.
Let's see if you can prove it.
Boom, 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 boom. Fucking. I can't remember, man.
His name's Castor, and his nickname is Zeus.
Zeus.
Zeus is the code name.
Man, it's been a while since I've seen it. Well, and we saw it last year, but
Yeah,
that's a good question.
Thank you.
I can't believe I couldn't realize that Michael Sheen's last name is Michael Sheen. I knew that.
I mean, there's Michael Caine, there's Michael Shannon.
Yeah, I know,
There's
but I know who Michael Sheen is. That's the thing.
I know you do.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why I asked you the question, because you just needed help with his last name. Is
Yeah.
all.
All right, Anthony, do we have any haters this week? I'm going to pull up a great written review while you do that.
We got some good haters. We got some good unsubscribes. First up, we got Luke Legendray on our Best Films of 2019. No mention of Ad Astra. Unsubscribed. We did.
We did bring it up, pal. We did. So
Listen to the episode again and
Resubscribe,
get
my
us some
man.
more ad revenue.
resubscribe, please.
You better resubscribe, bud.
Thanks for listening.
Yeah, it was like number 30. It was like 26 on the list.
It was up
I
there,
think.
yeah. Top
It just wasn't
top 40.
It wasn't on the low end. Next up, Matt Gravel. I must unsubscribe for forgetting Ben Stiller directed Tropic Thunder. JK, you guys rock. Love Transformers. That was me. I totally forgot.
Yeah, they forgot.
I can't believe it, man. I got Reality Bites, but I didn't get Tropic Thunder.
I know, right? I was like, there's no way he gets Reality Bites.
All right, from Salad. That's their name, Salad. I love
Salad.
it. Beautiful name. All right, love you, love you guys. But as a born and raised Nevada native, I'm appalled by your pronunciation of Nevada. It's Nevada. It has forced me to unsubscribe. I think we said Nevada.
Did we say Nevada?
I think so.
There's no way we said Nevada.
I don't know.
Why would I? I've never said Nevada like that in my life.
I think we said Nevada. I think
it's probably you.
It's probably me.
Probably.
Sounds like something I would say. All right, next up, Andrea on 2019. Subscribed, only to unsubscribe because Anthony forgot Sweeney Todd during the pop quiz question.
Yeah.
Ah, Sweeney Todd!
He'll never live that down.
Still not over it. Still not over it. Oh, my God. Jeez Louise. All right. Michael Angel Gonzalez. Unfortunately for you, Anthony, Sandra Bullock is not in Judge Dredd. That was Diane Lane. And although I too was a Sandra, and although I too thought it was Sandra, I must still unsubscribe. I thought it was Sandra. They looked a lot alike when they were younger.
Yeah.
All right, next up, Mask Trash on Mindfuck Movies. No mention of George Clooney's brilliant portrayal of the President of the United States, Diego Devlin. And from Spy Kids, unsubscribed. All right, here's one. Lauren Kimberly. Okay, I'm just catching up on the Bad Guys Wins episode, and I have two thoughts. One, when talking about Wicker Man, y'all really said we talked about this movie one recently, but this one in another movie. I burst out laughing, and then my dad asked me, what was so funny? I said, this is a movie podcast. Okay. Number two, I'm kind of surprised that you didn't include Crimson Tide. I get we're made to think Denzel is the good guy, but many make the argument that Gene is the good guy and Denzel's the bad guy. So, just my 2 cents. Gonna have to unsubscribe now.
I love Crimson Tide.
That's a great way to think of it.
I love Crimson Tide.
It's a good way to think of it. Like, who is the bad? There's no really bad guy in that movie.
Yeah.
They're both morally correct in a
Doing
way.
what they think is right.
Exactly. Michael Angel Gonzalez. Oh, I just said that one. Sorry. Kevin, when I think of the worst film of 2019, I always think of After. One, because it's offensively terrible, and two, because it became 5-movie franchise. I've never seen this.
After?
Yeah, After. Look up After 2019. My girlfriend at the time, now my wife, made me go see it here, and that decision is the only thing that about her that isn't perfect in my eyes. Now, for your offense of not including it as the worst movie of the year, I must unsubscribe.
I never even heard of this, I don't think. I think it was a Netflix movie. Just a straight to streaming, it looks like.
Yeah, I've never seen it.
Pretty bad poster.
Let me look. After 20. Is anyone famous in it?
Not anymore. Harrow Fiennes.
Oh, that dude's super famous, man.
Yeah, no, it was a joke. I didn't know who it was. I don't know by face.
All right. Oh, yeah, okay. I've never seen this.
Never even heard of this.
Never heard of it. Yeah. I promise we will not watch it. All right, that's it for our unsubscribes today.
Yeah, 5.3 on IMDb. That's not 18% Rotten Tomatoes. Not great.
Ooh.
All right, we have a great 5-star review written on Apple Podcasts from Electric Liam 19. 2025 review, still a wicked pissa podcast.
Hell yeah.
We had an icebreaker in my college group, and they were asking what your go-to music app was, and I said Raiders of the Lost Podcast.
Woo!
People thought I was crazy, but only if they knew how amazing James and Anthony are. I listen to you guys at the gym, in the car, and everything in between. Any episode I can just turn on and laugh and also learn so much. I always feel like I'm chilling with you guys in the studio, and I have to listen to all the time. So Anthony can buy his Trader Joe's.
Thanks, bud. We're getting some today.
Also, James's hair is just so majestic. Thanks, Liam. Love you, boys. Unsubscribe.
Your hair's very Bob Dylan today.
Yeah, I went Bob Dylan today, Liam. If you're listening to this episode, I just took a bunch of hair cream and just went, just like. But the headphones have kind of tamed it a little bit.
Yeah, it brought it down. But you got the glasses help too. You got you got a Bob Dylan look going on.
It looked better before I put the headphones on. But Liam, thank you for that wicked pissa 5-star Apple review written for us. We appreciate it so much.
Fucking awesome guy.
Thanks for listening all the time.
Fucking
Appreciate
spotlight.
it. Hopefully helping you hit those max reps.
Get those gains, bro.
Anthony,
Push it.
What's your streaming recommendation?
A Different Man is now available on Max. I thought it was a really cool dark comedy out of A24. Sebastian Stan is fantastic. Definitely check it out if you didn't get to see it in theaters.
I'm also recommending a movie on Max.
Oh.
The Guilty, the 2018 Danish version, not the Jake Gyllenhaal 2021 version from Netflix.
Oh, how was it?
Awesome.
I thought I heard a foreign language film.
Absolutely awesome. I was floored. Mm-hmm. It is literally just a one-room movie for the most part. Wow. 2 rooms. Camera on a guy the whole time. It's like Locke, the Tom Hardy film. Mm-hmm. That's all it is, but it's just such a great script, and it's so well thought out. It's very clever, very twisty, and really well acted, but the script's just fantastic. It's just nonstop communication on the phone, sound design. Mm-hmm. It's engaging. You wouldn't think it's engaging if you went into it blind. Oh, a camera. It's just a shot of a guy the whole time, basically. Yeah. Different camera angles, obviously, but they get very creative with the fact that it's one room, with different props around the room and different lights and stuff like that. But it floored me. My mouth dropped at the twist.
So he's like an emergency responder.
Yeah, he's
on the call, and then he gets a call about what?
So it's basically a normal day so he's dealing with lots of emergency lines and emergency calls, but then he also has a trial coming up the next day for something. You learn eventually what he's going to be on trial for. He's a former cop, but he's been put on dispatch for emergency response, for punishment, basically, kind of like a suspension. And so he's just answering calls in a normal day. All kinds of things come in, but then he gets a call of an abducted woman who's on the phone with him trying to communicate that she's been abducted. Ah. And then it goes from there, and it's just awesome because he's trying to do everything in his power to help her and then help her kids who are at home. Mm-hmm. It's really, really good, and the writing was It's just so good. I was blown away.
Nice. That sounds cool.
Yeah.
I'm going to check it
It's
out.
a quick watch. It's an hour and a half.
Good.
Hour and
So
a
I
half.
don't have time for 2 hours.
Well, no, but I mean, it's a
I know.
2-hour movie of a guy in a room.
Yeah.
Might be a little
That
too
pushes-
long,
that-
but
you're
it's
pushing it.
really just, it's very clean. It's really well edited.
Sounds like it's similar like Buried.
Kind of, yeah.
On
It's
the-
like
trying to save himself.
sort of.
Yeah.
It's like Buried mixed in Lock. You know, it's one location, mostly one character. There's other people in the room, but it's really good.
That's cool. Cool.
But I have no interest in watching the American version really, because I looked at the trailer. I remember seeing the trailer, but they just like they made the scope too big, and it's just too much. But it's very grounded. It's very small in scope in a good way.
Yeah, I never saw either of them.
Put on your watch list.
I will. I shall.
All right, let's get back to our episode on A Complete Unknown. And before we talk about fact versus fiction, did you know that this is the first time since Brad Pitt in 2011 that someone's been nominated for lead actor and 2 Best Picture nominees? And that's Timothée Chalamet with Dune Part 2 and A Complete Unknown. And that happened in 2011 when Brad Pitt was in Moneyball and The Tree of Life.
Chalamet got a lead actor for Dune?
No, he's the lead actor and a Best Picture nominee.
Oh, in 2 Best Picture
Two
nominees.
Best Picture
Gotcha,
nominees.
Gotcha.
He's the lead
I'm
actor.
sorry, I heard it wrong.
2 Best Picture nominees.
Sorry, I thought you said he got nominated in 2 Best Picture
Gotcha.
nominees.
That's
pretty cool.
Yeah, isn't that cool?
Fucking great year for Brad Pitt.
Yeah, it was a good year.
Tree of Life is goated.
All right, let's talk about a little bit about the fact versus fiction. So, obviously, this film leads to the Newport Film Festival in 1965 when Bob Dylan goes electric, despite the outrage of attendees and full community. But in Paul Murphy's exhaustive book, Bob Dylan, The Concerts, the 1960s, he points out that Dylan had actually played a full acoustic set at the festival the previous day. Now, this film, we're getting to spoiler territory now, obviously. The final act, really, at this big film festival. The full festival is not the first time he's played there, but the people who run it, including Pete Seeger, are worried that Bob's going to start playing the electric music that he's been starting to do. That he is releasing an album for his electric album, and they're worried that this electric sound will ruin the folk festival because they want to keep, one of them says he wants to keep it authentic, just a man and an acoustic guitar, that's what I want. And they're not ready for change. And that's why when Bob does his first album for that record label, he does all covers, because the folk scene has refused to change. They've refused to adapt. They've refused to innovate. That's why they just keep playing the same old songs over and over again. A new artist emerges, they just play covers. But they do have some shining stars, Pete Seeger, Joan Baez. But Bob Dylan is a different level. And this festival, the sequence is great. It's very dramatic because it's a back and forth fight between them trying to figure out, what are you going to do in the closing show? What are you going to perform as? You're a closing act at the festival. Are you going electric or are you going acoustic? They're trying to get him to go acoustic for like the last hour of the movie. And then he decides to go electric. And mayhem ensues. You know, they're trying to shut down the stage. The crowd's going crazy. They're hating what they're hearing. They're pissed off at Bob. And in the movie, Pete Seeger tries to shut down the sound. He tries to like destroy the cables. They're trying to stop the music and stop the sound and turn the volume down. Mm-hmm. However, according to this book and according to Pete Seeger, you know, he didn't feel that way. He didn't really try to shut things down. He tried to have the volume turned down, but he even wrote a letter to Bob Dylan saying that, you know, this is to quote Pete Seeger's letter, "Bob, someone just told me that you too think I didn't like your going electric in 1965. I've denied that so many times. I was furious at the distorted sound. No one could understand the words of Maggie's Farm, and dashed over to the people controlling the PA system. And they said, no, this is what they want. I shouted, if I had an axe, I'd cut the cable. And I guess that's what I got quoted. My big mistake was not in challenging from the stage the foolish few who booed. I should have said, Howlin' Wolf goes electric. Why can't Bob? In any case, you keep on, best Pete. So Pete in the movie is upset about it. He's trying to shut it all down. His wife stops him from doing it to let the performance go on. But Pete actually didn't really have that big of a problem with it. It was more of just an audio thing. Because
it was audio quality he wanted to fix.
Couldn't hear the lyrics. Yeah. But the movie portrays it like, with an axe, I'm going to shut the cables and cut the cables with a cord. You know what I mean? Which, it's great for the movie. It's great for conflict. But obviously it's blown out of proportion, it looks like.
There was also debate about how much the crowd hated it in reality. So based upon real events in the film, it looks like a majority of the crowd starts booing, and they start throwing stuff at the band, and they're vulgar and they're upset. And then there are people in the audience who are like having fun and liking the music, but the film portrays the crowd as mostly hating what's happening. In reality, based on reports and from Bob Dylan's keyboardist, I can't remember his name, Alice Cooper.
Al Cooper.
Al Cooper. Not Alice Cooper. Al Cooper.
It's not Alice. I thought at first, I'm like, is this
Yeah,
Alice
I was like,
Cooper?
is that Alice Cooper?
And I looked it up. It's a folk singer.
Yeah.
Al Cooper with Kooper.
And he joins the band, doesn't have an instrument to play, so he starts playing the little organ keyboard, and that's where you get that intro to like Rolling Stone. He said, and he was there, he said there were a couple people booing, but everybody was, for the most part, vibing with it. But there were some people who weren't happy. But he said it was just a small handful. And he then said it's really the journalists who attended it. They blew it out of proportion. And obviously, I mean, that's media. You just make it as extreme as possible to get your story more interesting, to make it more interesting for readers. And so he said that journalists made it seem worse than it really was.
Also, the day before he did the electric set on the closing act of the festival, Bob Dylan did a full acoustic set.
Mm-hmm.
Did a full acoustic folk set at the folk festival.
There's photos of the actual photo event, and everyone's smiling, and Bob Dylan's smiling, playing acoustic. So it's like this. I mean, this is a movie, so they have to add stakes because there weren't huge dramatic conflicts in Bob Dylan's storyline at this point in his career. So they obviously embellish some things to create more conflict for a movie, especially you're heading into the third act of a film. You need to give the audience something to see, and you need some kind of stakes. So you embellish a little bit of Pete Seeger, you embellish the crowd a little bit. But if you do a little bit of research, there's a lot of photography from that event, and it looks like everyone had a blast.
Yeah, but what people were upset about in the final act of Bob Dylan doing the electric set is they only played 3 bands. They played for 3 songs. They played for 11 minutes, then they left. That's all they had rehearsed. And so that's really what mostly people were upset about at the final performance in the closing act of the the Newport Film Festival 1965.
Yeah.
But it worked great in the movie.
I think it worked.
Which is fine because, truth versus...
People weren't throwing food at Bob Dylan in real life, but it's a movie.
Truth versus fiction, it's a biopic, it's a movie. And Bob Dylan once said, truth was the last thing on my mind. And even if there wasn't such a thing, I didn't want it in my house. So even Bob Dylan was full of half-truths and no truths. For example, making up the stories of being part of a carnival. It's something that he went to New York with these stories. I'm sure there are more. And also changed his name multiple times. He went from Robert Zimmerman, and then, which was his born name, and then Dylan scholar Paul Murphy attributes the date that he changed to Bob Dylan was finally chosen in early February 1961. He'd be using the pseudonym Bob Dylan, but Dillon, for at least a year. But while visiting the White Horse Bar in New York for a folk session shortly after arriving in the city, he saw the famous picture of Dylan Thomas, spelled Dylan, in there and chose the alternate spelling on the spot because it read better. And it does.
It reads way better, like much, much better. And I loved the sequence with the Cuban Missile Crisis. I think it was one of the best parts of the film, and JFK is on TV.
You can't have a biopic in the 1960s without JFK.
And I like how, it was reminiscent of like the COVID breakout. Everyone in New York City is like trying to leave the city, and everyone's in a panic, and they think that nuclear war is about to happen. And then even you see Joan Baez, she's trying to hail a cab. She's packed a suitcase. A lot of the people in the city feel as though they're in imminent danger. And then she misses her cab. It drives off, and she ends up walking down the block, and she hears a song. She hears a voice, and it's so transfixing that it leads her into the little folk club where she finds Bob singing a new song that he just wrote. I love that scene because it showed the paranoia of the time, but then also what music and art can do to people. It can make people, relax. It can make people forget about the problems of the world just for a moment and appreciate something human in even the most dire and stressful circumstances. I thought that was a really great sequence, and I liked how they laid that out. Obviously, it didn't really happen like that. And also the Joan Baez sequence introduction when Bob goes to the club for the first time, when Pete introduces him to the folk scene, and he's like, all right, he's been going around, he's been playing around clubs, but I thought at time he comes to the big leagues and plays at this place. And Joan was playing when they got there, and Bob's watching her play. In reality, Joan was invited by a friend to go to that club that night because this new guy, Bob Dylan, was playing, and she's like, you got to hear this guy. He's amazing. He's terrific. So they rearranged things, but I think it works better for the film. Not everything has to be exactly as reality. I think it works better because seeing Bob watch Joan, and you can see an attraction, you can see the shyness and the crush immediately, and then there's a cute playfulness to him when he gets on stage and he calls her pretty, maybe a little too pretty.
Sings pretty.
I think that, and then that's what gets her to stop and pay attention. He's like poking fun at her. And I thought that was really great how they, changed the reality a little bit, but narratively in the structure of a scene, it works better.
Yeah, it's better for courting.
Yeah.
He's courting her at the same time as Sylvie, and this is like, instead of the steps of like where they meet, blah 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 blah. Let's just do this, and then they kiss and hook up during the Cuban Missile Crisis scene. So it works. It's fine. But everyone was so great. The singing was fantastic. Everyone sang and did their own music and guitars. They had plenty of other musicians playing guitar and banjo and harmonica for different sets and here and there, and they're all credited in the credit roll. But all the actors did do their own performing as well. And Monica Barbaro really floored me in this role. I'd really only seen her in Top Gun Maverick. I know she was on that Chicago PD show. I can't remember what it's called.
Oh, yeah.
But she was really terrific as Joan Baez. This is clearly her biggest role yet. She's just got nominated for an Academy Award. It's such an impressive thing to do, but she was also really terrific in this performance. Such great singing and really beautiful voice. Lots of training went into it, of course, but I think it's really cool to see someone who starts small, starts in TV, small role in a huge action movie, a big Tom Cruise movie. Then really, this is your spot to shine. Mm-hmm. You're acting with one of the biggest young stars on the planet Earth, and you really hold your own. And you're really one of the best parts of the film. And Monica really floored me. I think she definitely deserves a nomination. She's got potential to win, but she's very talented and really was a standout for me in this movie.
I loved Boyd in this movie, man.
Oh, Boyd
he
was
was
awesome.
So good as Johnny Cash. Like, just his voice, and he's a blonde guy, so to see him with the dark hair, I was like, oh shit. And
did they do prosthetic work on him? They had to have.
I don't think so.
It looks like a different human, man.
I think changing the hair really helped make him feel different.
I feel like they put a fake nose on him.
Maybe they give him a bigger nose. You might be right.
Because it's not his face, I'm telling you. It's him, but it's not him.
And then once he started singing and playing the guitar, and how Johnny liked to have the straps up tight, so he had like the guitar, and he's like using the guitar like a rifle. Like I was like, oh my god, he's so good as Johnny Cash. It's fantastic. I loved him as Johnny Cash. He was really such a great scene stealer. He had like 10 minutes of screen time, if that, but man, he made his presence really felt, and I loved it. His voice, everything about it. Ed Norton was also fantastic. I also really liked the live TV segment. Pete had his TV show.
Yeah, that was cool.
Where he would have musicians on, and it's like this is live TV with no breaks, and they're just rolling. And then and then Bob comes in, and he's learning blues riffs from that blues guitar player. And also, I thought it was fun. I mean, blues music has so much influence on rock and roll, and like the Stones were the Stones because of blues music from America. And I thought that was a really cool sequence of like this live TV show that Pete had, and then it turns into Bob and this blues musician just riffing together. It was really cool.
Scoot McNairy as Woody Guthrie, also really great. Doesn't say really a word. Woody Guthrie suffered from Huntington's disease, which is just a terrible ailment, and forced him to not be able to speak and have very limited movements. And he died at the age of 55 in 1967, but was a huge icon and a hero of Bob's, which is obviously why Bob sought him out. I didn't look into whether or not Bob really sought him out to go to the hospital to find him. Maybe that's true. I didn't look that up. But if that's true, that's really fascinating. And obviously you can't do that today. There'd probably be some security in place, or wouldn't want or a private place to be in your hospital. But I think Scoot's great. Scoot's such a great underrated actor. He's done a lot of stuff. He doesn't have that many lead roles, But when he is on camera, he crushes it. I mean, he's great in Speak No Evil most recently. That was a bigger movie he's done. But I've been a big fan of Scoots for a while.
Monsters.
Yeah, Monsters was great. That was his big breakout, and even Killing Them Softly, he's really good. But Scoot's awesome, and even though he doesn't really have a word of dialogue, he's really terrific in this movie. Great nonverbal acting, and Woody Guthrie really acts as this sort of emotional anchor for Bob. It seems like whenever Bob is going through turmoil, something he's having a tough time dealing with, it seems like he goes to visit Woody to really ground himself again into what he loves about music, why he started singing and songwriting, and really connect him with his past in a lot of ways, because it really seems to clear his mind in a lot of ways, but also going to see Woody is therapeutic for him because he's his hero in a lot of ways. And I like the scenes in the hospital between Woody and Bob, and also whenever Pete's there as well. But I really think that Scoot's just so underrated, and he's awesome in this movie.
It was really, I wasn't expecting to see so much tragedy in this film when I walked into it, and watching his physical deterioration get worse with every visit. And, he, at first, the first visit, he's pretty lively and he seems to be, still himself, just physically struggling, but he's got his personality. And then his last scene, he can barely do anything. He doesn't really have much personality left, and he can't really control most of his motor functions. And when Bob leaves him his harmonica and then drives away for like the final time, I was really heartbreaking. And Scoot absolutely destroyed this. His physical performance was so impressive, and man, I think like I said earlier, I think those scenes were really vital for this film to work with an emotional core and emotional center. Also with Sylvie, because it's heartbreaking. And I read interviews with Sylvie, and the Sylvie, the destruction of the Sylvie relationship seemed to be authentic to real life, where she loved him, he loved her, but she couldn't deal with the stress. She couldn't deal with what his life had become. She said there was too much gossip, there was too much chaos surrounding the orbit of Bob Dylan's life, and she didn't want to be a part of that. And I think they had a really great touching moment when he brought her to Newport. I love when he just pulls up at her place. It's like, come to Newport with me. come to Newport with me.
Come on, Sylvie.
Come on, Sylvie. And they get there, and she realizes again, like, oh, this is why we're not together. And then she leaves for the ferry. And
I saw that the song that he sang is about her. That's why she left.
That too, but also she can't deal with what his life is. She can never do it.
Yeah, she's like alert, like, all right, one last time. Maybe this is a turning point. But then he hears the lyrics to the song that he's singing with Joan, and she realizes this is about me, because the song's about, I'm never gonna be that guy for you. That's what that song was about. I'm not the guy, even though you want me to be, even though you think I am. I'm not that guy.
Yeah, you're not that guy. You're not that guy.
You're not that guy.
Bob, you're not that guy, Bob. And they have a great goodbye with the fence in between them. It's a really nice, simple metaphor. The fence between them, they'll never be able to hold each other. There's just, this is always going to be there.
They can see each
This
other,
wall.
but yeah, there's something between them. Dan Fogler.
He's great.
I love Dan. Every time I see him in a
him.
movie, I'm just like, oh, this is going to be great. And I didn't even know he was going to be in this movie.
Me
until
either.
I saw him. I mean, he's Joan Baez's agent, it seems like. And then he becomes Bob's agent. He's like,
I'm his manager.
Really, really terrific, right? Yeah, that's my client.
It shows the blood-sucking nature of agents.
Yeah, but he's always funny. He's always reliably good in his roles, and I love to see the success of actors like that who just like make their come up in TV. He's in The Walking Dead for a while, and then Fantastic Beasts.
Yeah, he was in The Walking Dead.
Yeah, for like 3 seasons.
What?
Yeah,
No way.
He's in like 20 episodes.
I always remembered him for using the ping pong movie with Christopher Walken.
What's that
Balls
called?
of Fury.
Oh my god.
Yeah, Balls of Fury. Right, that was his breakout.
He's got such an interesting filmography.
Yeah, he's been all over the place.
But yeah, being Jacob in Fantastic Beasts, such a huge role. You're the co-lead in the new Harry Potter franchise, and then obviously The Offer, he plays Coppola, which is really cool.
So good. He's so good in that.
But I mean, I love him. He's so funny. He just exudes just this great charm, the silliness, and I think he's great as an agent, just like a bloodthirsty, overly confident, pompous guy, but also, he's trying to make his buck too. But he's someone who understands Dylan.
Yeah.
When the folk guys are trying to get them to change their scenes, like, you guys gotta listen at music at folk in a different way. Like, he's on Dylan's side, which was cool to see. Like, an agent, like, obviously this is where the money is, but at the same time, he understands what Dylan's doing. He understands the style is changing, and it was cool to see the scenes in the sound booths and recording, where at first they're doing the acoustic stuff and he's doing the covers, but then he's doing his own album. But then when they go electric and the sound mixers and the engineers are like, "The fuck is this stuff?" and they're playing it, and then the agent played by Dan always like he heard this music and the guy's like, "Who wrote this?" Like, he wrote this. And then Dylan just experimenting with different things, that little
the
whistle thing he finds on the street. It's great, but I like the scenes inside the sound booth a lot, especially when Al Cooper comes in there, but each band member's like slowly coming in. Like, one of the guys, he gets the electric guitar that they just got in London that Bob purchased. He starts playing it. Then Timmy pops up from like behind a chair with his harmonica. They start the song, and the bassist comes in, the drummer comes in, then Al Cooper comes in. So I like that scene where they're starting like one piece at a time, coming into the room to start the song.
Yeah, and the harmonica playing was great. It was
Awesome.
real. I can't remember what I saw recently. There was someone playing a harmonica, but it wasn't real. Like, they were just like, they weren't even like, they were just like fake miming it. But it was like, I was like, that person's not inhaling and exhaling incredibly large breaths like you need to with the harmonica. Like, I was like, that's kind of BS. But then with Timmy, he's really doing it. And you can tell, like, just because the breath work you have to do to play that thing properly. I loved it. I thought it was fantastic. And man, I think he's got this, the hair in this film worked so well too. There's the evolution of Bob's look. He's got like the really simple put up hair when he arrives in New York City, but then into his fame, he's got the glasses, he's got the big curls. It's just this giant mess of hair, the sideburns, and really when he was wearing the black outfits, I was like, he feels like Dylan. He really does.
It's Muad'Dib, man.
It's Muad'Dib.
Journey South.
Boom, dun, dun.
Literally. But I mean, makeup and hair did such a great. I'm trying to find the department head of hair. So Patrick Allen. Patrick. Oh no, that's not the head. But whoever was in charge of hair, great job. Because fucking hell, that's got to be. I remember seeing a Dune interview after the first movie came out of Denis. And he always answers with very funny answers sometimes, but he was asked, like, what was the most difficult part about production? He's like, controlling Timothée Chalamet's hair.
Taming his hair is impossible.
He's like, you need a whole crew just for that.
Can we talk about Chalamet's marketing of this film?
Sure.
I think he's really, in a way, revolutionizing what the idea of marketing a film is, what promoting is.
100%.
He's having fun, which is tough because press tours are exhausting for actors.
So controlled.
Traveling around the world, time zones, multiple time zones and days, answering the same questions over and over again for weeks on end, being shuttled around the world. You don't get to sleep. It's a lot, and it's part of the job. Actors are now also promoters. Chalamet seemed to be just doing his own thing, having an absolute blast, being very creative, whether he's going to universities around the world and bonding with the students there and the faculty there and
screening the
film there, or whether he's going on ESPN to talk about college football. He's playing Bob Dylan songs on SNL. He's going on Theo Von. He's doing all these really interesting things that, promotions, like you said, they're so highly contained and highly controlled. I think that in a way they've become too rigid. And for pros, there are reasons why, protecting the self-interest of the film's release, not making sure nothing happens that jeopardizes the overall monetary gain of a film.
Like just what just happened with Emilia Perez.
Yes, exactly. Stuff like that. So there is a reason why they are contained and rigid, but also, audiences, you need to get them excited. We can't just keep seeing actors only on Jimmy Kimmel and Fallon and answering the same questions again. And
BuzzFeed and puppies.
Yeah, puppies. And like, there's only so many puppy videos until that just gets to the point where it's like, okay, there's more puppies. I get it. I understand it. But I think his press tour for this film was so exciting and so fresh. And it wasn't, you can't deny it had to have played a part in the really great success of the film's box office returns.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't say it was a very, very successful film. I mean, we're talking about $90 million on a $70 million budget. It's not a great hit.
Not a huge hit, but it made more than you might expect.
Yeah, than a musical biopic probably would.
Yeah.
I mean, it's still in theaters, of course, and it's still making money. But at the end of the day, it wasn't a huge box office performer. I mean,
I didn't realize it had that big of a budget.
yeah, I mean, it's New York City, man. In New Jersey, you're filming outside a lot. And I mean, Timothée Chalamet is on this movie. You got a bunch of stars in this movie. So
Great point, yeah.
I mean, I'm sure Ed Norton probably pulls 5 every movie he's in.
Yeah,
So-
I mean, you're in Fight Club. You get to make good money every time you make a movie.
So, the budget was pretty high. If it was a $50 million budget, then that's a pretty good performance, 80 mil.
Estimates are between 50 and 70 mil.
Yeah, so it's tough.
So,
I
yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
but at the end of the day, if your movie's 50 mil, you really want to clear $100 million to be a profitable film after
True.
movie tickets splits with theaters. But, it's a solid performance.
It was a crowded holiday season.
Yeah, it was
very crowded.
There was a lot of movies at the
Yeah.
end of the year.
Yeah.
There was a lot of stuff to see. But that doesn't mean it's not a good performer. It's not amazing,
You're right. It's not absolutely earth shattering.
But still, I think music biopics, clearly what we just saw this year, maybe people are getting a little tired of them to an extent. Better Man bombing.
I can't think of a bigger bomb at the box office.
And then this does pretty good.
Yeah.
It might be a reason why also the Michael Jackson one got delayed again.
Do you hear the rumors about it?
If they're true.
They're doing CGI noses.
On Michael?
Yeah.
Why not just do a prosthetic? It's pretty easy.
Well, I know. I mean, well, I don't. It's not easy because it shrinks over time. It gets smaller.
Yeah, so start big and go small. I don't see the problem.
So, but apparently they're having trouble with the visual effects with the CGI noses.
It's just like Justice League all over again.
That's the Justice League mustache.
It's going to look wonky.
And apparently they're doing overhaul of rewrites and reshoots right now.
Why not just go practical? I mean, just go scary movie style.
Oh my God.
I'm just saying.
Oh my God.
But no, I agree. I loved Chalamet's campaign, doing unique things because media's changing, entertainment's changing, marketing is changing constantly. And, he's got so much control over his career right now, which is such a luxury for someone so young, even though he's the biggest star in the world. Now he's producing movies. He produced Bones and all. He produced this. He's going to produce Marty Supreme. So he's got 3 producer credits under his belt now, which is really cool to see. And, I think it's interesting that Timmy did 2 musical films in 2 years in a row with Wonka and then A Complete Unknown.
He's saving those vocal cords.
He's just a really talented guy. But I agree. I love the marketing campaign. Even taking the bird scooter and parking it on the red carpet was so funny. And then his outfits, all being references to Bob Dylan.
Yeah.
And just, he's in Paris and he's lip syncing Edith Piaf with a Raiders jacket on. It's just the memes
like a rapper.
Yeah, the memes are great, and it's like all these controversies are happening. And it's like all these old tweets, and then it's like meanwhile Timothée Chalamet doing this, whatever
Just
this
having
is.
fun.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just like having a blast. I think he's just top of his game, having the most fun possible in this job, which is very demanding. But, for a movie star to maintain their identity in a really positive way is pretty rare, and I think it's really exciting.
Yeah. At the end of the day, people just want to be able to connect with the stars that they love in some capacity, and I think he is beginning to provide no BS, in a way, non-filter, honest look at him. He can be a really silly, goofy guy, and I think that he's leaning into his own personality for marketing.
Yeah, he's giving goofy guys a rep.
Yeah, exactly. Rather, we don't need to hear the same stories again. We don't need to hear the same questions. Like, let's just, make people excited about going to see this film and help create a great aura for your movie star and let him do his thing. I think that's the way they should go forward. Just let your star, help dictate how he wants his movie to be promoted.
But, yes and no, though. That's a good thing for some people,
Yes,
but
yes,
you
yes.
can't do that with
Not
some
for
actors.
everyone,
Like,
yeah.
actors aren't like they are in movies. Timmy's a rare example, I
Yeah.
think. You give some actors or an actress free will to say whatever they want, they're going to fucking bomb the movie and their careers.
We see that happening this
so
year.
that's terrible advice, Anthony.
That's not
Very
okay.
few-
Some
There you
stars.
go.
Yeah,
View.
some stars.
Some if they demand it. And it seems like Chalamet, publicists, PR teams, studios, they don't want their talent going on podcasts unless it's like maybe like something very legit, or I don't know, Mark Maron, I guess, is pretty safe. I mean, Obama's been on that. So I think that podcasts specifically, they don't want their talent speaking for 2 hours straight with no control over what they're saying. They don't want that. That's terrible. It's bad for business.
No, it's good for business.
Anything-
You guys have them on our show.
Anything can happen,
Come
man.
on to Raiders of the Lost podcast. They should come to Raiders.
Anything could happen.
It's great. You're killing the business, man. Podcasts are great. Don't listen to James. Send your movie stars to Raiders of the Lost podcast.
Podcasts are great.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, like, some actors you do not want to talk for 2 hours.
Oh,
on
yeah,
a podcast.
I agree.
And
I
I'm
agree.
sure 98% of them don't want to do that.
It's a big commitment.
You know, a lot of them don't. I wouldn't want to. I mean, would I want to do that if I was an actor? I don't know.
You wouldn't want to come on to Raiders of the Lost podcast?
I don't know.
You're invited. Either
Thanks.
way.
I appreciate it. I'll reach out to you guys.
we'll talk to
My
you.
people will get back to your people.
Oh man, I think he's doing a great job.
Yeah, but overall, I think Mangold did a really great job with this movie. It's really well directed. It's safe to an extent. There's nothing risky really to an extent of what you can do with biopics at the end of the day. But I think
it's relatively safe film.
It's nothing crazy going on. It's not very controversial at points at all. It's filmed really well and shot really well. And again, the sound, one of my favorite parts of the movie is probably the sound design. I think the sound mix was awesome. Mangold's a very talented guy. Love Ford vs. Ferrari. Walk the Line's awesome. 310 to Yuma. The guy's, he's one of the best directors out there.
Copland.
Copland's, he's great. He's
you
awesome.
blew it! Sorry, I love that.
And I think he's the biopic guy when it comes to, grounded biopics without the fanciful theatrical elements of other biopics, of music ones. I think he's the guy.
He's definitely the Johnny Cash guy.
He's the definitely a Johnny Cash guy.
100%. I think overall it was a really solid film and exactly what I was hoping to get and what I expected. And everyone did an outstanding job. And I really enjoyed the film. I had a great time with it.
I was doing a Bob Dylan impression for a day straight. I was just around, yeah, man, let's get some lunch later.
Welcome to Raiders of the Lost Podcast.
Raiders of the Lost Podcast.
What is that?
Timmy's the guy, man. Timmy's the guy.
He's on top.
I think this movie has a shot at Best Picture now.
I don't think so.
I think it's between this and The Brutalist.
I think Brutalist and Amelia Perez, with their controversies, I think they're going to struggle to get votes. Because voting starts February 12th to 18th. That's the voting window for the nominees.
Oh, really?
So, Dune Part 2 might sneak a fucking victory, man.
I hope it wins Best Picture.
And also, so that's why I think Chalamet will is the front runner now, because Brody, with his AI, the voice AI controversy, I think that...
Which isn't his... This is not his thing.
Exactly, yeah.
He's
but I
just a
think that
performer.
it's going to affect votes for him.
Possibly.
And I think that Chalamet might sneak by with the victory for Best Actor. And I think with both of those films, Brutalist and Amelia Perez, with pretty bad press this past month, I think Dune Part 2 looks like a front runner for winning Best Picture. Just saying. Throwing that out there.
Throwing it out there.
Don't sleep on Dune Part 2 right now.
I never would, but again, I'm not watching the Academy Awards anyways, because I said I wouldn't if Denis not nominated.
Yeah, you did. You're sticking to your guns.
I'm sticking to my guns.
Yeah.
Unless they invite me, then I'll go. But
Yeah, you're not invited.
No,
James.
they're definitely not going to invite Raiders of the Lost Podcast.
They don't. They never do. One day.
They know who we are, but
Yeah.
we used to be their favorite podcast, but not anymore.
Not anymore.
Not anymore. It was a nice time. Anyways, you got anything else on A Complete Unknown?
That's all. That's all I got to say about that.
All right, well, thanks for watching A Complete Unknown, everybody. Appreciate you all so much. Become a patron today, patreon.com/Raiders of the Lost Podcast. Now it's starting to sound like the super sounds of the 70s from Reservoir Dogs. Become a patron today, patreon.com/Raiders of the Lost Podcast. Leave those 5-star ratings and reviews on Spotify and Apple. Subscribe on YouTube. Share us on Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, whatever. YouTube. Leave a comment. Cheers. Thank you. Take care.
See you next time.
This episode was brought to you by our chosen one patrons, Jacob Kossler and Nicholas Martin. Thanks so much, boys. Raiders of the Lost Podcast is a mirror image production. Sound mixing done by Jacob Kossler. Opening music by Chase Jackson.